So how do you deal with an anxious person whenever you come across them? Today I want to help you with that and teach you 6 critical questions that you can ask an anxious person so that they can actually overcome the problematic situation that they're in, change their frame of mind, and become more confident about themselves. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. Can I really overcome this? But what if I fail? I don't know if things will ever go my way. Anxious people are all around us, and it's important to recognize that they need help. And that's why if we frame things right, if we help them out, they can overcome their anxiety. Today I'm going to break down exactly what you need to know about anxiety. How do people start feeling anxious in the first place? How can we help them, and how can they overcome their problems? Keeping all of this stuff in mind, let's start off with the most important thing. Why do people feel anxious? Well, let's realize one thing, that people who are anxious are always thinking about the worst case scenario. They are either pessimists, they're sad, depressed, people who are fearful of the smallest of things. Often this is learned, majority of the time it's learned, and sometimes it's something that we are traumatized by due to something in the past. Anxiety-provoking thoughts can dominate our mind and cause us to not see the bigger picture or see any possibilities. So keep that in mind. Every time you're dealing with an anxious person, this person is always imagining the worst case scenario. And often this can be very hard to be around, especially, if you're someone who's not, doesn't have an affinity for being around anxious people, or you don't like having that energy drawn out of you. It can be really problematic. So imagine that it's really problematic to be around these people, and it's also very debilitating for them, which is why if we help them out and make them see different possibilities on how they can come out of the situation, that can be super powerful for them. So that's essentially why someone feels anxious. Someone feels anxious because of the fact that they have learned it. They have learned to not deal with the situation. They have learned not to take action. I'd like to reframe this for you and make it simpler to understand by putting forth an example. Think of it like a student who is bound to take an exam at the end of the year. At the start of the year, the student knows that, hey, I need to write an exam. What do some people do? Well, the smart ones, or the front benchers usually, start preparing from the very start of the year. And what do some other people do? The average students, they start maybe a month before the examination. And of course, the so-called last benchers who do not really perform well, someone like me, they typically study in the last moment. We have like 2 days before the exam. Sometimes people start studying the day of the exam. And unfortunately, the performance curve usually is in reference to that. And you realize that everyone starts on the same level when they begin. However, how the situation frames itself later on is based on what each person is doing. So the person who scores the highest marks typically starts from day one. They are preparing themselves. And what happens to them? They are confident about themselves. They are sure of themselves, and they are confident about the fact that they have studied and they can ace the exam, come what may. The person who is average, on the other hand, is thinking, hey, how can I overcome this? Okay, let me be a little more careful and let me study. So this person starts maybe a month before the final examination. And the last one, he doesn't really think too much about it. Hey, the exams are going to come, and then you will deal with the situation when it does come by. And this person usually feels the most anxiety compared to anyone else. Think of it like this. It's something of a picture frame that you can draw as you see fit, but it's behind you. Now this picture frame grows as a problem based on how much amount of time that you choose not to spend on it. Now, if I face it this way and I don't see the problem that's behind me, the problem continually grows as I come closer to the exam. and I ignore it. Now I know that as things are moving forward, there is something that I need to actually do. I need to deal with the problem. But okay, now I see that there's a problem that I need to do, but I just don't want to do anything about it until it reaches a point where boom, it goes above your head. This is the situation with most people who face anxiety. Because they do not take action soon enough, that's when it creates problems for them. So if you or you know anyone who is unable to do this, make sure that they take action every single time that they want to prevent a futuristic problem. Situations go out of hand because we fail to act. And if we do act on time, then anxiety can be prevented. Okay, so what do you do now in case you haven't been able to do that? It's simple. You need to understand that you have to work through the anxiety. You need to face the problem. You need to confront yourself, bring that problem in front of you, and then face the issue at hand. The unfortunate situation is that most people tend to ignore it for so long that it seems so daunting. And when you actually confront them with the problem, it's so huge and so daunting that, imagine you haven't touched your books for an entire year and now it's time to study for the exam. And once you're confronted with the problem, it just creates so much anxiety that you can't study and you can't really do anything about the situation that you're in. These are the issues. And what happens? You create a vicious cycle where you're always thinking about the worst case scenario. You're always being dominated by what could go wrong, and you fail to see the possibilities in the end. Keeping all of this in mind, don't worry about it. If you know someone who is doing things this way, either prevent it or do what I'm about to say. Ask them these 6 critical questions, and I promise you that you can help them come out of their anxiety. And this works even if the person is sad, depressed, facing an anxiety disorder, or just has some general anxiousness, or is being triggered by something that provokes a little bit of fear or anxiousness. All of this stuff works. If you use it effectively, I promise you that this will work. Just follow these steps. Number 1. Question to them is, you ask an anxious person, what exactly is your concern? Notice how I'm trying to get it across to them. Number 1, exactly. When I ask them exactly what they are thinking about, it tries to narrow down their focus to what the problem actually is. People often think about multiple possibilities. Can I deal with this in the first place? So many thoughts, pictures, and things are going on in their head that they cannot deal with the problem. But when you ask them to narrow down their focus and find out exactly what they are thinking about, then they can deal with the problem. So what exactly are you so concerned about? Remember that if you want them to see possibilities, you need to make sure that you give them time. Someone who is emotionally provoked is feeling anxiety. They have their survival mechanism running long time. I mean, their cortisol levels are really high. They're extremely stressed out. You don't want to create a frame where you come off as standoffish and you're trying to get through the problem very quickly. Give them a little bit of time so that they can actually deal with the problem. That's the first thing. So ask them exactly what they're concerned about. Set the tone of the conversation and give them enough time. Make sure it's in a safe environment so that you can talk to them in a more convenient fashion, which will allow them to open up to you. That's the first thing. So ask them exactly what they're worried about. Number 2, realize that we want to understand their worst case scenario. Make it come out and let them see it for themselves. So the question is, what can we do to prevent this worst case scenario that you have just mentioned? Now let's say it's a student who has to give his exam in some time. The student is extremely worried and believes that he or she is going to fail. However, that thought can be a very daunting thing in their mind, but we want to bring it out so that they see it for themselves that, the worst case scenario or the worst thing that could happen is that I'm going to fail. Once they see it like that, or once you frame it for them like that's the worst thing that could happen. Hey, I'm going to fail. So what? People fail all the time. So how you frame things is also important. So frame it in this way and ask them what is the worst case scenario and how can we prevent it. After you have done that, again, you want them to start seeing more possibilities, and that's where question number 3 comes in. Question number 3 goes like this: what are all of the hurdles, impeding factors, and problematic considerations that you need to keep in mind if you're going to deal with this situation? So actually make them list all of these things. Let them become aware of it. Okay, someone who is writing an exam, what's the issue that they need to face? Okay, I don't have study time. I do not have enough knowledge. I need to be tutored by somebody. I don't really understand these concepts. I'm not very confident about the fact that I can score the marks that I want to. So many variables to consider, but make them say it. Ask them to bring it out. I would go so far as to say, make them write it down. Make them list all of these things, and once they have it on paper, they'll realize that it's not that big a deal. And once they start doing this, they start to dilute the problem. They dilute all of the negative outcomes that may happen. And at the same time, they have an option of seeing the different possibilities that can actually come out. So, having said that, you want to make a list of all of these things and then frame it moving forward about seeing possibilities, or allow them to see possibilities moving ahead. So for that, you need to move into question number 4. Question number 4 is very interesting because question number 4 is going to help them see the different possibilities, or at least see one possibility to start off with. And you ask them, so what exactly can we do to improve the situation? Is there a possibility that you see coming out of this? So once you ask them this question, what happens is they see what exactly can be done. And remember that it has to come from them. What can they do in order to alleviate this concern? When you say it, it really doesn't mean anything. That's why suggestions aren't always going to be the best thing for them, because they are concerned about what they can do. You want to be empowering them throughout this entire process. Keeping that in mind, frame it in the way that I just said, that what is your concern and how do you think that we can alleviate this concern right now? What possibility do you see? And once you say that, immediately they start thinking more positively about the situation. When it comes from you, it means nothing, or it means something to them. However, when it comes from them, especially an anxious person, it means everything. Keep that in mind. Move into question number 5. Question number 5 is very simple. Ask them this. Based on the current situation, do you think that things will repeat themselves as they have in the past, the exact same way? Again, we're looking for specificity. We want them to be specific about their response, because they think about so many possibilities about how things have gone wrong in the past and now that they cannot correct it in future. That's the whole problem. Frame it in a way that they see that, hey, this situation is different. This time things are going to be different. This time I am going to conquer. This time I am going to correct the situation. I am going to do things differently. That's the kind of framework that you want to create for them. So ask them this question: do you see this situation that is going to happen right now repeating itself exactly the way it did in the past? And if you've done all of the other 4 or 5 questions right, the last question will become a breeze. They will bring it out themselves a lot more easily. But again, remember that an anxious person typically takes a lot of time to come out and to open up. It's a matter of trust. It's a matter of opening up to the right person. A lot of things to consider. And that's where question number 6 comes in. If you've done everything right, what could go right? What could go right this time? It's a matter of practicing optimism I have spoken about this in a previous video about the success triangle and how today, if we are going to become more emotionally intelligent people, we need to exercise optimism. Remember that someone who is anxious is also typically going to be a pessimistic person, someone who thinks negatively or doesn't see possibilities. However, someone who exercises optimism, who does it on a frequent basis, always sees possibilities. You want them to see possibilities too. So ask them the question, what could go right? And as they keep doing this, constantly seeing that, hey, these are the different possibilities that I have at my disposal. When they see the options that they put forth themselves, the positive results that they want to see are going to be so much more likely. It's so important. All of this has so much to do with framing and asking these questions, not only framing them in the right way in the sense that how you actually word them across, but also the way you say them. So many things to consider. That's why watching all of these videos and also bringing all of this content together is so important. So ask them all 6 of these questions. Spend time with an anxious person. Make them realize that they can overcome the situation. But remember, frame it so that it comes from them. Because when it comes from you, it means something or nothing. But when it comes from them, it means everything. It means everything to them. And they will thank you for it once you help them out. So keep all of this in mind. Ask them the 6 questions. I would say mildly nudge someone who is anxious. Do not push them or pressurize them into doing something. Once you bring them to that state, then they come to a state or a sense of power and confidence. And once they learn the skill of how to overcome their anxiousness, you need to make it a habit for them. Make sure that they have everything laid out for themselves, that everything is clear, and I promise you that they will overcome their anxiety. Work with all of this. Let me know down in the comment section below if this works for you. Is there someone who is anxious in your life that you've been struggling to help? Ask them these questions and let me know if it works for you down in the comments. Hit the like button if you found this video useful. If this is your first time here, remember that we are dedicated on this channel towards making you the best version of yourself and having you perform like a champion in every single area of your life. That's my goal. I want to make your year awesome. 2019 is going to be your year, and every year beyond that, we are going to keep going and making you better. That's the goal. If you're looking for stuff like that, remember, subscribe, hit bell notifications, watch the entire playlist that I have made. 52 different kinds of people that we need to cover and we need to talk about so that you can deal more effectively with different people across the spectrum of your life. I want to help you out with all of this, all through psychology, all through science. This is Vikram signing off, and I will see you in the next session.